Okay, I know people are still waiting in line to get lunch, but we're gonna go ahead and get started.
You gotta speak
Welcome.
louder.
I have to speak louder, please. Huh. Everybody just needs to be quiet probably more. I don't think I have a louder unless you want mean mom voice with swear words included. I'm excited about today's presentation. So Jonyce was telling me about a presentation that she did for a client, and they had a women's group, right? Right. And I was like, what the heck, Jonyce? Like, you need to do that here. So we put it on Jonyce's busy schedule, and here we are. I also want everybody to make sure that they saw Sierra's messages today about our upcoming community event. Oh,
I
okay.
just saw those there.
Okay. Do we want to hand these out?
Yeah.
Okay. So, we need to get on the ASAP to get these invites out to be able to get people at that event. It's November 3rd, right?
Yeah.
November 3rd from noon to 1:30, and it's at Thanksgiving Point somewhere, right? Oh, the great room at Thanksgiving Point.
I'll give one to each of you, but then I'll leave the pile up here if you want to take more good plans, but.
So think about all of your women clients, women contacts, and email them. It always works much better to have a personal connection. Even if a couple of us email the same person, that's even better, right? And then I believe, so that will be our November WIP meeting. Is that right? Do we know, Sierra? Is that right?
Yeah.
And then typically we usually do a charitable, something charitable in December for our event. So we'll have more information on that. So anyway, I'm just gonna turn the time over to Denise. We're gonna hear from her.
Do we know? Somebody run this. I don't want to stand over there. Can you guys hear me, or do you want me to try and figure out the microphone? No? You good?
Oh,
I can hear
I'm
you.
good.
people that are online, be professional and show your video.
We want to see everyone. So, okay, so like Amanda said, this is something that I did for a client, and I've kind of done it for a couple different groups over time. And now I just got intimidated with this Tim here. Not intimidated, but you'll hear. Anyway, you'll hear why. Anyway, this is something that I've done for like I speak at national conferences and whatever. But a lot of times I think that maybe I haven't shared some of the stuff here because they're like stories of things that happened in my career along the way. And there might be some things, ultimately, this is a very positive presentation, but there may be negative things that happened. And it's like, do you want to, talk about it? But I just think it's better if we just talk about some of the things and talk about how we've addressed them as a firm or, overcome them, ways that we've changed and things that you can kind of learn from that. So these are just kind of stories. This is what it's going to be, and it's informal. So story time. And I got just a few slides. It was funny. I almost deleted these out. And then I was reminded that we've grown so much. Not advanced. Do you guys know? We'll figure this out. Does it?
Is it not?
I'm clicking the mouse.
Oh,
clicking
I
the
bet you
arrow.
have to click on this, yeah, so that it's.
There we
on.
go.
There you go.
Because I think you're on it, but got it. Got it now. Okay, so anyway, I was like, oh, they all know who I am, but then I realized not everyone does. So I just had, when I was doing this presentation for the client, it was just like a quick intro to me, and I've got it kind of divided into a little bit of who I am in different ways. So, I mean, you guys know a lot of this already, but the work stuff, I'm CEO here, obviously. I was our first female partner in 2011. Led the firm's advisory practice area before I came into this position. I became the managing partner with my title. I took over from Tim. So I stepped into some big shoes. And then shortly after that, we changed the title to CEO, which I think I have a story about that later on, about why we did that. I'm a member of the AICPA board. I was on the AICPA Women's Executive Committee for 3 years before coming onto the board. I'm very passionate about women's issues in the profession. Past UACPA president, I'm on BYU and University of Utah School of Accountancy boards. I work with Susan Madsen, if you're familiar with her, on the Utah Women in Leadership Project. I'm ambassador on that with her. And in 2020, I was one of the CEOs of the year. So that becomes important later. We have to learn to talk about ourselves. So just the family stuff. This is my family. I love spending time with my family. So we've got some of you know my son Caden on there. So Caden got married in 2021. So his wife's Tracy. And then my daughter Kaylee. So Kaylee's up at Utah State. Caden's a student at BYU. And so Greg is my husband. We're basically empty nesters now. So fun stuff. We like to travel. That's kind of our big thing as a family. We like to travel. And then I like to swim. I swam competitively in high school and 1 year in college. So, and then this is what I call the real stuff. So that's the stuff that you see, you know, day to day. It's what it looks like. But the real stuff is, at least for the last 5 to 6 years, I've been battling for my family members some significant medical issues. So my daughter Kaylee, and some of you have heard this, if you've been around, you've heard my stories, but Kaylee she's up to, I think, 12 now, rare diagnoses of condition. She was losing weight rapidly. And in 2020, November 2020, she ended up having a kidney transplant. So that's what these pictures are over here on the right. And that was after another major surgery, which is the upper scar. So she's kind of been through a lot. You can see her zooming into her class from the hospital the day after her transplant. So that was our quarantine, was doing that. Then in 2021, in like the world's craziest twist, my husband ended up being diagnosed with a similar condition, but not related. And he ended up having a kidney transplant 1 year and 1 day later after. So that is him last November. So we're coming up on his 1 year anniversary. Just a few facts as we kind of get into some of my stories here, though. Women in accounting. So in the US, women have been represented in the accounting profession by 50% or more for more than 25 years. So it used to be when people talked about how to get women, you know, represented fairly in accounting, it was a pipeline issue. We didn't have enough women going into accounting programs. We didn't have enough women being hired into firms. But that's been fixed for over 25 years. Now, despite that, only 19% of CPA firm owners, partners, are female. So something is happening between when we enter firms and when we, you know, get to that partner level. And then you see the same thing actually happening at like the C-suite level for those that choose to go into industry. And really what the AICPA has done is tried to figure out if it's a matter of women not advancing, like being held back, or leaving the profession. And what they've learned is most of the time it's women self-selecting out of the profession. It's not a matter of firms like keeping them at a level and not moving them up. And so then once they figured that out, they started focusing on what are the barriers? What is keeping that from happening? And the thing that's really fascinating to me is that these 3 barriers can also be the 3 success factors. So if you do them right, they're success factors, but if you just ignore them, they become barriers. And so the first one is career advocacy. Second is lack of visible female role models. And then the third one is career and life integration. And so for those of you that have been part of the WIP program since the beginning, you've kind of heard all of this before. But how many years ago was it, Amanda? Like 8? That we were part of the pilot program?
Yeah, I think it was 20.
Yeah, a long time ago. We were invited, Tim was serving on an AICPA committee, and they reached out to him and invited our firm to apply to be a pilot program with the AICPA in creating women's programs for firms our size. And we were really excited to be selected as that, and that is what helped launch this program. And really, this program was based on those 3 things. It was based on this research. And so we have tried to build the program around that, like creating ways for career advocacy, adding access to the visible female role models, which was part of Amanda and my conversation about having me do this. Is like, well, if we really believe in that, why aren't we continuing to put us in the front? So, and then career life integration. So hopefully we always kind of go back to that and make sure we're providing opportunities for each of you to address these and not have them be barriers, but have them actually be success factors in your careers. So we can have a whole discussion on those if we want. This actually takes you to the Utah info. So this comes from Susan Madson's research. This is generic to just Utah women leadership, period. It's not CPAs specifically. But Utah CEOs, you can see that 4.7% of CEOs in Utah are women. So you can see that the numbers that we're dealing with at the national level get like even worse at the Utah level. And that's one reason that this program is really important to Squire and why we've invested in it. And we're investing in each of you and trying to make sure that we're helping with this as well. So this just kind of gives you a, by the size of firm, what those numbers are as well. So, all right, so we kind of jump into my stories. So my first one is kind of that like role model and people that inspire you. So that first picture there is me. And what you can see is my dad's elbow there. My dad was an accountant. He was not a CPA. He never actually took the exam, but he was an accountant. He worked as a controller primarily, but he did tax returns on the side at home. And I would sit by him and do taxes. And so he was my first like inspiration to be excited about accounting, to be excited about taxes, and was always very, very supportive of me and getting into my career. And I think it's so important that we have people who are supportive and they show us opportunities. That second one there, that's Mr. Hart. He was my 7th and 8th grade math teacher. And I thought I was terrible at math. And I thought that like STEM, right, anything that had to do with math or numbers, even though I wanted to do accounting, I just had this like mental block about math. And for some reason, he just kind of took me under his wing in 7th and 8th grade and just kept telling me, you're so good at this. And he found ways that I had strengths in like problem solving specifically. And so he would work with me. He would give me extra assignments that like played to my strengths that I could do extra credit with until I gained some confidence in my math skills. And so I actually just randomly ran into him at a grocery store one day a couple of years ago. That's what that picture is there. And so he was key to my path there as well. That picture, the next one over, I don't remember when we took those. That was probably about the time I was about a senior here in the firm. And I had access to a ton of great mentors, great people here in the firm that invested in me. We'll talk about a lot of those as we keep going. And then the picture on the right was my first partner picture. So that's kind of my path. And then I'm here now. So, and apparently my hair went curly sometime. I was gonna say sometime, it was over COVID. So anyway, okay, so these are just like, so there's a picture and a lesson on each one. So I'm just gonna kind of tell the stories here. So these are just my lessons learned. There's no particular order. These were just things that I thought about for me. What are things that I would share with people? So any of you that have kind of done my new welcome meetings the last couple of years, sometimes somebody on those calls will ask, like, what's your one piece of advice for a new employee? And this is the one I always give you. So some of you have heard either this story or at least this advice. So my first lesson is say yes and then go figure it out. And this is why I'm saying I'm intimidated that Tim's here. So Tim was the first partner that I was assigned under, and I worked with him for the majority of my career. And when I did an internship, I started here as a tax intern. At the end of my internship, Tim made me an offer to work part-time while I finished school. And I remember coming back like right after the deadline. I'm pretty sure it was the 16th. And I was like, there's not even going to be anyone in the office. What am I going to do? And I came in and I was pretty right. There was really not very many people in the office. Tim was here and that was probably about it. And he walked over and he handed me a QuickBooks box. And it was QuickBooks like 95. Even though this was not 1995, I think that was the version though. And he said, I have a client who just bought this and they want someone to teach them how to use it. So you're going to go out next week. And I'm like, I've never used QuickBooks. And he's like, just put it on your computer, click on every button, run all the reports, and just go do it. And he's like, as long as you're one step ahead of them, you'll be fine. And I remember him telling me later in my career, which was the same message he told me that day. He said, whenever a client asks me if I can do something, I always say yes, and then I come back and figure out how to do it. And of course, like if we're talking about ethical situations or something, don't always say yes, right? But have the confidence in yourself that you have the ability to figure out how to do it. And just be willing to say yes, and then come back and figure out how to do it. I believe that this has been the key to my entire career. I have been adaptable from day one because I just knew how to say yes. We can have a whole different lesson on like boundaries and not saying yes too often. That's a different story, right? But the ability to say yes and then go figure it out is huge, and feel confident in doing that. And one of the things that Tim really did well for me as a mentor is helped me to realize that I had everyone here at the firm to help me. So if I said yes, I wasn't going to be just on my own to figure it out. I had an entire wealth of resources that would be able to help me to be able to follow through on that ability to carry out what I had just promised the client. So that's my first lesson learned, is say yes and go figure it out. Oh, you need the picture story though. So we were doing, this was a recruiting dinner, just right out here. And I don't remember why we were outside doing like a full dinner. We've totally changed the way we do it now. But the sound system that we had got was not very good at all. And then the traffic is a lot louder than I think anybody anticipated out there. So poor Tim was at the front trying to give a presentation and nobody could really hear him. And Ruben and I, we were like, well, if we could figure out how to hook up this microphone, that one actually, to the sound system, then we could do it. And I remember Tim saying, does anyone know how to like, I'm trying to think what the word is, like basically hotwire a sound system. And both of us were like, no, but we'll figure it out. And I remember Ruben and I running in here. We came into this closet. There's a whole bunch of like audio visual stuff in this closet. We're like pulling out wires, figuring out stuff. We go out there and we basically hotwire a cable from in here all the way out there and made the sound system work for Tim. So that's part of my say yes and then go figure it out. Just be willing to do things that make no sense. Like I had no idea that day that I could figure it out, but I always believe that I can figure it out if I need to. So, okay, my second story. I see so many of these involved Tim. You can speak up and correct me if I say anything wrong, Tim. But so I don't know how many of you have read Sheryl Sandberg's Lean In. We read it originally as a WIP group, but she has a chapter in there about the physical act of sitting at the table. And it's so interesting to me that that's in that book because that has become a metaphor. I actually have two different stories specifically that have greatly impacted my career. But you guys have probably all seen the boardroom upstairs with this big, massive, beautiful table. I'm pretty sure we had to bring it in with a crane. So, and then you've got the chairs that sit all the way around the outside of the table. So one day shortly after we had finished the building and that room was there, I was invited to come into a meeting. It was actually an exit interview for our peer reviewers. They were going to just kind of do a debrief with everybody. And I went to the meeting, and the interesting thing was I was there a couple minutes early, and there were a bunch of people that were there a couple minutes early, and it was all females. Like we all showed up to the meeting early, but I walked in the room and the women had lined those chairs around the outside of the room, and literally no one was sitting at the table. And I just walked in and I was like, you guys are here early. Why are you not taking the comfortable seat? This is how my brain works. And so I went and I sat at the table. And then shortly after, the men started to show up and they filtered in and sat throughout the room. I didn't think twice about it until after the meeting. Tim and the partner who were presenting this from the firm that did our peer review, they like said, hey, can we talk to you? And they said, did you notice you were the only woman to sit at the table today? And I was like, oh, no, actually I didn't. And like basically this partner had said something to Tim about it and about how impressed they were that I was willing to sit at the table because women don't go physically sit at the table. And then it was a couple of years after that, Sheryl Sandberg's book came out, and she has an entire chapter about how women don't physically sit at the table. So what I'm inviting you to do today is physically take your seat at the table. It makes a difference. You belong at that table, I did it because it was the comfortable chair. I thought, actually, those chairs are pretty miserable, but I thought it was. But like, you belong there and have the faith that you belong there. If it's because it's a comfortable chair, great, cool. Do it for that reason too. But take your seat at the table because you have a different conversation when you're at the table. You engage differently when you're at the table. And then the second time this happened, again, see, you guys are going to hear all these stories. A lot of these things, one of the things Sheryl Sandberg says is women tend to attribute their success to luck. I don't know that I would say that. I would say mine's a little more like, I just sometimes naive to certain situations, right? So I went to a meeting with a very large insurance broker here locally. And they took me and this employee I brought with me into this conference room and they're like, we'll go get Lane. He's the CEO of this brokerage firm. And I looked at this, they had a rectangular table. And I looked at it and I thought, okay, I brought all these papers that I want to show him. And if I sit here and Jordan sits with me here, then we'll be like leaning these papers across the table. I don't want to do that. So I took the seat at the head of the table so that when this guy came in, I could like just hand him the papers. So he comes in and I remember like for a second him kind of stopping. So I stood up and introduced myself. Then he comes around, we have the whole meeting. I don't think anything about it. I'm walking back out to my car and I hear someone calling my name and I turn around and it's the CEO of this brokerage. Hey, Jonyce, can you come back in here? I was like, okay. So I came back in and he said, I just have to tell you, you were the first person ever to sit at my seat at the head of the table. And because of that, you've won my business. And I was like, oh, that was just because I wanted to show you the papers. Right? But it goes to show the importance of having that confidence that you can sit at this. I really see a table as like a metaphor for my career. And I invite each of you to consider the times that you can sit at that physical table or even the virtual table, have your cameras on, participate, engage. What are the ways that you can take that seat at the table and really be part of the conversation? So that's one of my lessons. My daughter would kill me if she knew that this was on here, but I liked the picture. So this one, I have a couple different stories here. This is, so I'm going to have the scary, I'm going to tell the story that makes me nervous to tell internally. But have the scary conversations and use those to help change culture. And also, I just say, don't just leave. Like, if you get frustrated, don't just leave. Let's have the conversation. Let's have the hard conversation. And then that also fits into accountability partners. So you're going to hear the whole story here and then come back to that. So, the first story, I was participating in a program that we offer to a lot of our managers called ELA, Emerging Leaders Academy. And as part of that, you're assigned a mentor that's a partner. And generally, we match somebody up with somebody that's not in their practice area, so it gives them an opportunity to mentor with somebody else. So Shane Wood was my mentor, and I was working with him. We were having this conversation about working towards becoming a partner. And I had made the comment to him that, so Dave Archibald and I joined the firm about the same time. And we worked in the same department, we worked closely together, so we talked a lot. And Dave would say to me, so the story I'm going to tell about this partner is no longer here. I'm also going to not use his name anyway, but just so you know, it's not somebody that's here anymore. So anyway, Dave would say to me, we both had the same partner who was over us. We had the same supervising partner. And he would say, hey, this person says, if I want to make partner, I need to work on this. And I was hearing these little things all the time. And I got thinking, he's never talked to me about that. He's never told me what I need to do to make partner. So when I was talking to Shane, I just mentioned that. And I said, so you guys, does the partner group not see me as a potential partner? And I could tell by Shane's, like the look on his face, he was horrified. And he was like, I need you to go talk to him about this. Like, nope. And he was like, no, I need you to go talk to him about this. Like, when you come back tomorrow, I want you to have an appointment. If you don't, then I'm gonna like call him and tell him that you need to come talk to him about this, you know? And I don't know if he would have pushed me that far, but he knew I needed to be pushed. And it really did freak me out. And this ended up being right before Thanksgiving. So of course I made the appointment, but I had to think about it all like that Thanksgiving weekend. So I came in and I sat down, and I was intimidated by this partner anyway, even though he's my supervising partner. So I sat down, I got brave, only because Shane told me to. That's where this accountability partner thing comes in. And I just said, hey, so I'm just wondering, like, do you see me as a potential partner? And he's like, of course I do. Why would you think that we don't think that? It's like, well, you've never talked to me about it, and you talk to Dave about it all the time. And he just looks stunned. And probably not his finest moment, he says, well, Dave and I talk about that at lunch, and it would be inappropriate if I went to lunch with you, so we can't talk about it. And I just sat there, like with my mouth hanging open. And this is where the don't just leave comes in. I see so many situations now where if that kind of conversation would happen, somebody might just leave. And I remember going to Tim and saying, is this really a policy? Like, do I really know this? And then, but in that moment, I said, could I go with you and Dave? And it was like it had never crossed his mind. And he actually was like, actually, no, you could totally go with Dave and I. And so it changed from there. Well, do I actually agree that I couldn't have gone with him alone? No, that's a whole different conversation. But this was also 15 years ago. And anyway, we worked really hard consciously. I was not yet a partner, obviously, but Tim and the executive committee were very responsive to my feedback in that situation. And we addressed it with partners, we addressed it with managers. Tim specifically took like it on himself to like go out of his way to take our female managers to lunch after that and make sure that the women were being invited to lunch. And so that very awkward, uncomfortable moment led to a complete change in the way we approach things and the way we thought about it and the way we openly talked about it here as a firm. Are we perfect still? Probably not. Am I aware of the ways we're not perfect? Probably not anymore. So, you know, this is that like invitation again to have the scary conversation, whether you come tell me, whether you come talk to Tanya in HR, whether you talk to your supervising partner, but have that conversation and be willing to do it because it opens up a lot of doors. And not only has it helped to change the culture, but because of that, I then had partners who were going out of their way to take me to lunch or to have a conversation with me about becoming a partner. And so sometimes we just get so busy and we don't realize we're not having the conversations you're hoping that we're having. Sometimes we think we're having them and we're actually really bad communicators. So, you know, if you take the Gallup strengths test across the whole firm, communication is not in the top 5 of very many CPAs. So, you know, we think we're communicating and we're not, but speak up and have those hard conversations and that will help to change culture. Again, having an accountability partner or sponsor, mentor, coach is key as well. I don't think I ever would have done that had I not had somebody pushing me and helping me to be brave enough to do that, or maybe not even being brave enough, but just had to do it. So, my second story, so this kind of goes into where I just kind of get naive and sometimes things come out of my mouth that I don't intend. I'm sorry, Tim, I'm going to pick on you again. Yeah.
Over here.
Yes.
So I can
Do you want to take my slides? Yes. Okay, perfect. So one day I was taking a new recruit around the office. For some reason, we used to think that like seeing the office was a really great part of recruiting. So I was taking him around the office and I ran into Tim and Shane Edwards in the hallway and they were both wearing shorts. And Tim made the comment like, oh, I apologize, I'm underdressed, but we just got back from golfing. And then he said something like, I made a goal this year to take somebody from here golfing every week for the whole year. And he's like, so far I've made it, I don't even remember, it was like 17 times, like he'd been a lot. And before my brain even like computed what was coming out of my mouth, right? Remember, he's the managing partner. I am not. And out of my mouth comes, how many of those have been women, Tim? And he's like, well, actually, none of them have been. Do you remember that, Tim? And I was like, well, why not? And he's like, well, that's a good question. So, but then, and this is where you're going to see we changed culture. And actually, I'm skipping ahead of story, but that's okay. He said, find two other women and we'll go.
I'm just trying to get.
You want me
in
over
the
here?
camera, in the camera. Yeah.
I was down
Well,
in the
you don't have
light.
to stand in the light, but if you stand like right here. Right there.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Okay.
right there.
that's right out of the light. Perfect. Anyway, he's like, find two other women and you'll be with my group next week and we'll go to Riverside together. Guys, I think I asked every female in this firm and no one would go with me. So, and some of it might have been conflicts, but for the most part, people were like, I've never played. That's uncomfortable. Like, what if I embarrass myself? So I actually ended up taking it was Tim and I and two other male staff members. And so Tim and I kind of schemed that day and we looked at what the barriers to golf were for the women in the firm. And there's a picture of this. I don't know if it's next slide or not. It is. Perfect. So that's my be bold and think outside the box. It kind of just feeds into that. But we did golf lessons that summer. And we, once a week, any of the women in the firm who wanted to come, we went and learned how to do golf lessons. We invested in clubs. We still have those. If you guys don't know that you have them, we do. You should know. So if you get invited to play in a golf tournament or to go with somebody, don't let access to clubs be a barrier. So we have 2 sets of women's clubs and we can get more. If they're being checked out too much, we'll buy more. And maybe we need to relook at lessons again. But we started our women's golf tournament, which is very, very low key, like good entry, come play for the first time so that we can introduce women to golf and have it be comfortable. So be bold. Don't worry that you're about to tell the managing partner how many of those have been women. Just do it. Be nice, be kind, right? But think outside the box. Think of different things that you can do and have solutions. And so I think it's been a really beneficial thing to be willing to kind of challenge those status quos. So the next one, Courtney. Okay, speak up, your voice matters, understand room dynamics. So 3 things for the same story. This is the first partner picture we took after I became a partner. It was like that Sesame Street, one of these things is not like the other, right? So I had decided when I made partner, I was just going to go to the first few partner meetings and I was going to be totally quiet. And I was going to sit there and I was going to like read the room, figure out what it was like. This was a very conscious decision in my mind. And then right before my first partner meeting, Tim informed me that I needed to speak up at it. And I was like, nope, not going to do that. Thanks for the invitation. Go to that meeting. We're sitting at that super fun table we referred to a few times. And at the time, we actually did not have a sexual harassment policy. And we were switching our insurance carriers and the new one wanted us to have one. And so Tim had brought to that first partner meeting like a boiler template sexual harassment policy. And we were just looking through it to see if there was anything on there we would want to change. And then at the very end, it had all incidences should be immediately reported to, and then you would kind of fill in the blank. So we had come to the conclusion, again, I sat there very quietly. We're okay with this boilerplate. We just need to decide who to report it to. And one partner with a pretty strong personality said, to the managing partner, no exceptions. And Tim was like, you want it to say no exceptions? And he was like, yep. And then somebody was like, well, what if it is the managing partner? Is like, okay, so your supervising partner or the managing partner, no exceptions. And so again, Tim clarified that and the whole room's like shaking their head, yes. And I'm like squirming in my seat, squirming. But I'm also like, you said you weren't going to talk. You said you weren't going to talk. And this is where understanding room dynamics comes in. I don't know how many of you are familiar with the study out of BYU a few years ago. And we can get it to you. But there's a political science professor down there who worked with a political science professor out of, I believe it's Princeton. Do you remember, Cindy? Didn't you? This is Karpowitz's. Is it Princeton? So it's like a super liberal college and a super conservative college. And they ran these studies and they found the exact same thing. So Has nothing to do with whether you're in a conservative culture or a liberal culture. But what they found is that when women are outnumbered in a room, they won't speak up. And so what he's trying to do is put out this information so that if somebody is facilitating a group, like putting together groups, there's a whole bunch of things in there. It's more than just that. There's things like if you have two women, they're more likely to speak up in a small group versus just one woman. But if you understand that as a facilitator, you can better facilitate it. I don't think that study was out. I think Tim just kind of fundamentally understood that. I've always appreciated having Tim as a mentor, because you can see how many ways he influenced me. But he looked at me and he goes, Jonyce, you look really uncomfortable. Is there something you want to say? And I was so scared. I was like, literally my first comment in partners meeting that I didn't even want to talk in is going to be about sexual harassment. Yes. So I just said, do you realize, I think we actually voted. I think he could tell I was so uncomfortable even after the vote. Anyway, I said, do you realize that we just made it so that 95% of the women in this firm have to report sexual harassment to a man? And the room was like an audible, like, and they were all like, we didn't even think of that. Why didn't you say something? Right, this was not a group of men who were trying to make us as women report it to them. Didn't even think about it, right? So having me at the table, my voice matters. Speak up, your voice matters. Whatever conversation I was having with myself about staying silent, those first few partner meetings, that was just dumb. I shouldn't have been thinking that. Your voice matters, even if you're a brand new employee, even your first day here. So speak up, your voice matters, and then understand room dynamics. So, and maybe you're not going to be the facilitator, but you can help educate other people on room dynamics as well. So, okay, more challenge the status quo. This is actually one of my favorite funny stories, to be honest. So when I started at the firm, we used to have a shower. So I don't know how many of you know, we had that side of the building was the only building. This over here, we actually purchased some extra property, tore down some houses, and then built this side of the building out. So at the time, we just had that side of the building, and in the basement, there was a shower. And there were a couple of the men who went running or played basketball in the mornings very consistently. And so they would come in and shower, and they'd just leave their gym bags on the floor. So when I had Caden, and I needed to pump or nurse him, sometimes my mother-in-law would bring him in. The only room in the entire building that had a locking door was that shower room. So I would sit there on a folding chair, that's why that picture's there, and gag, because I could smell their running shoes and clothes while I was pumping or nursing. Again, I didn't ask for anything more than that. I just didn't. Yeah. Sorry. Thank you. I'm a wanderer, and I usually wander away from the light. So anyway, so when we were building this building and remodeling over there, I went to Tim and to the executive committee, and I proposed that we put in a mother's room. And again, I was not a partner yet again, still. So I was a little bit nervous to do it. And they were so welcoming and so excited to do it. Now this is where some of the don't let the men design the experience comes in. So that is why we have a mother's room. Hopefully you all know we have one. It's on that side of the building on the top floor. But I walked over one day and walked into the room, and the builder was in there, and he was showing me some things. So this happened twice. And they were putting the sink, right now it's over on the right, but it was going to be right in the middle. And I was like, oh, can we have it on the right? And the guy was like, well, why? I said, well, I want to put like a changing table right there. That's how we designed the room. And he was like, you're not going to have live babies in here, are you? Well, no, just dead ones. So like this builder could not fathom why I would have babies in a mother's room. So that was kind of what happened there. And then shortly after that, when they got that all installed, I went over and walked in. We just got the rocking chair, and the electrician was putting the lights in, and he was super excited because he got the super like high grade super sensitive motion detection light. And I was like, can we switch that for a switch? And he was, I mean, I was very much offending him. Why would you want to switch? And I was like, well, we're going to rock. And the light's going to turn on every time you rock. And he was like, why would you do that? So, and then I was trying to get him to put a plug in under the changing table for a fridge. And he's like, what's the fridge going to be for? So anyway, just make sure you stay involved. That's my story. So, but we do have an amazing mother's room. I'm sure there's definitely things that could be upgraded. We were designing it on the fly, and I was also retrofitting some of the stuff that was already in the approved plans. So, but that's what we've got. Make suggestions. Come, you know, we're very open to those kinds of things. We don't want people in this metaphorical folding chair forever. Let us know where we're missing out. Speak up. So, all right. This is my ask, tell, don't assume, and surround yourself. So, because it takes a village. So this was the day that I got my CEO of the year. This is representative of my village. It's obviously not a complete village, but I liked the picture. So, when I was a manager, remember talking to Tim about, and this other partner that was over me, like, what are the next things I need to do to become a partner? And they had made the comment, like, it would be really helpful if you did some leadership training. This was before the ELA program. And so I think Tim said, like, go look into some leadership training, propose it, kind of thing. So I walked into Shane Edwards and said, hey, do you recommend any leadership training? And he said, well, we need to back up. It's like, okay. And he said, do you want to be a partner? And I was like, well, yeah, of course I want to be a partner. And he said, then you need to start telling people that. And I was just kind of stunned. And I was like, isn't it assumed that if you're working here on professional path, you want to be a partner? And he's like, no, absolutely not. It's not just assumed. And he's like, and I'm here to tell you, the men are telling us they want to become a partner, and we've never heard it from you. And that was a big light bulb moment for me that day. I just assumed that if I put my head down and worked hard enough, people would notice what I was doing, and they would realize that meant that I wanted to be a partner. And I'm so thankful, again, to mentors and sponsors who would tell me things like that. And so from that day forward, there's a whole group of people, and I've mentioned many of them already, but that helped me to tell that story. And they helped to represent in meetings that I was not in. That's the importance of a sponsor. You know, when things would happen, they would represent that I did want to be a partner. So if somebody spoke up and said, oh, this is one that was really common. I was part-time for a long time. They'd say, oh, she's just part-time. And so those men that I was working with would say, actually, she hasn't been part-time for a couple of years. And even if she is part-time, she wants to be on a partner path. And here's what we're doing to help her do it. And so don't just make assumptions. So the other side of that is when I did become a partner, and this is what I tell the men all the time, one of our first partner retreats, we were discussing like upcoming potential partners, and we were actually going through talking about people individually. And hopefully Amanda's okay if I talk about her for a second, but Amanda's name came up, and we had just talked about another person that had started kind of similar to like Dave and I. This person had started around the same time as Amanda, and they had just talked all about him and, oh yes, of course he does, and this and this. And then it came up to Amanda, and immediately we said, oh, we don't think she wants to be a partner. And because of the experience I had, I said, what do you mean you don't think she wants to be a partner? And they're like, well, we don't think. I was like, well, have you asked her? Well, no. And I was like, why haven't you asked her? And this partner's no longer here either. He was retired. Anyway, I was having this kind of, it wasn't one-on-one, the whole group was involved in this, but it was kind of me asking him specifically. Anyway, he said, well, she has 3 kids. I think that's how many she had at the time. She has 3 kids and you have 2. And I was like, and you have 7, so why does that matter? But this is what the AICPA's found, that whole visible role models is when there's only one path to partner, when there's only one visible role model, in this case, me, then if you don't look exactly like that person, sometimes it's harder for you to see a path and it's harder for the people around you to see that path. And that's one reason I think it's so important for us to make sure we're highlighting the great female leadership that we have in the firm. So we've now blown that up. We have lots of different numbers of kids and it doesn't matter. And I called it out right in that moment. And so right then, we created a don't assume, go ask. So just like we're telling you to tell, I'm also teaching partners to ask. So, just be aware, don't assume something, ask about that situation. So, all right, overcome imposter syndrome. Even today, I'm like, oh, they don't want to hear from me. They hear from me all the time. They don't want to hear from me. That right there was I think that's the dinner. If it wasn't the dinner, it was the retreat. Either way, you guys, when I got up there after 2 years of not doing in-person things and I looked at that room and it was huge, I was like, I don't belong. Like, I belong in the 80-person firm. I don't belong here. Just realize everyone has imposter syndrome. Everyone. I sat in a meeting yesterday. I'm in a group called YPO, and it's all CEOs, and most of them are very large companies. And there's 9 of us in this group yesterday, and like literally 2 of the men were in tears. They're leading, like one guy, an $80 million firm. He's literally like, I don't belong here, and I don't know what I'm doing at the seat of this company. So even the men have it. So just realize that we all have imposter syndrome. Be willing to overcome it, or at least constantly. I use the word overcome, but obviously it's more like confront it, deal with it. You have the skills. Believe you have the skills. If we ask you to lead something, it's because we believe you have the skills. If we don't ask you to lead something, step up and ask if you can lead something. I love it when people step up and ask if they can lead something. We have so many things we need help with. So role models do matter. Like I said, if you can see it, you can believe it. And then the power of seeing it. And then y'all know I'm attached to Think Again this year. So just think again, like just because we've never done it that way before, just because somebody that looks exactly like you isn't at the top, doesn't mean that it can't happen. So, okay. I was looking through this lesson. I was like, what was this one? I was hoping it would come up. Oh, no, it is. This is the title, CEO. Okay, I told you I was going to tell you this story. So when I took over as managing partner from Tim, we sent out a press release and I changed my status on LinkedIn. And I kept these actually in a folder, and I should go back and recount them again. I got something like 80-ish people who sent me messages. Congratulations on making partner. And I was like, I've been a partner for 7 years. What are all these messages? And I remember going to Tim and I was like, did people not understand what managing partner was? And he's like, I never really had an issue. And I would go to events and I would introduce myself as managing partner. And I have at least 3 stories where someone would say, can you introduce me to the man in charge? And I was like, I just told you I'm the man in charge. And they're like, but who's in charge of you? And I'm like, that's what managing partner means. So somehow what I was learning is when a male held that title, it didn't compute with the public. When a female held the title, it didn't compute with the public. And I started talking at the AICPA level with the people that were in these groups that I was in, and they were finding the exact same thing. And so they were starting to change their titles to CEO. Right around the same time, we merged with the Salt Lake office. This is, again, one of those moments where you don't think through things, but it works out well in the end. We merged with the Salt Lake office. We put Shane in Edwards. We wanted him to go up there and run that office. And we're like, hey, he needs a title, office managing partner. And it took us all of like 24 hours to realize office managing partner and managing partner were super confusing, especially when I was already dealing with that man in charge issue. And so I think it was about a week after that, we decided to change my title to CEO. And you guys, like 200 people reached out to me. Congratulations, this is amazing. Way to break the glass ceiling. I wasn't doing anything different than I was doing the day before. We just changed my title. So this is why I say words matter and own it. Like I was afraid that putting out there, I'm the CEO would be bragging. I was afraid that it would be, I'm trying to look self-important, but it's important to Squire for me to own it and to be the face of Squire. It's important for me to be here talking to you today, even though I'm afraid it feels like I'm trying to brag on myself. Words matter, own it, you belong there, and just overcome that implicit bias. So everyone has it. It was men, women. I'm not picking on the men, women, all of them. They did not understand what managing partner meant. They understood what CEO meant. Use the right words. Words matter. So. Okay, and then addressing that work-life integration piece, the AICPA is identified. Shall I get back over here? Sorry. I'll maybe put like an X. That might help. So I love work-life integration and not balance. So, and you guys heard me, Valerie did this, and I think I spoke up about it already. So I just have the pictures, but somebody told me once, did I tell the Segway story when you taught, Valerie? Okay. So I finally rode Segways for the first time in May, and I actually experienced it. But yeah, somebody told me if you're on a Segway and you're balanced, it doesn't move. The only way a Segway moves is if you're leaning forward or leaning back. And so if you're in perfect balance, then you're probably not moving forward in your career or at home or whatever. And so what you have to be doing is leaning into one, leaning back in the other, and overall you're achieving balance. But when you can find ways to integrate your life, it makes it better. So these are just some examples, and I'll work on not crying. But so this one up here was a UICPA awards, a dinner where I was being recognized. I brought my daughter so that she could see examples of strong women. Left my husband at home, and this one, dang it, I'm not doing good with that crying thing. There was a conference in Orlando, and so I decided to go early and bring my family. And as you can see, you guys will recognize Megan and Mark. The other one over there on the left is a guy named Sam who worked for us too. They were coming to that same conference, and my family just said, "Hey, come with us over to Disney World." So they came a day early. They joined our family. They're in every one of our family pictures in that event. I love it. But my family literally feels like Megan, Mark, and Sam are family members. And so that kind of feeds into that one. Caden had some health problems on his mission and had to come home early. Blah, cry. And I should probably just even start over here. When he was leaving, the day he was leaving, dang, see, it's okay to cry. He was very freaked out about leaving the country. He was going to Peru. And, they get to the airport and they're able to make one call. They feel like they're going to prison, right? So he calls me from the airport and I could just tell he was emotional. And this is my kid that's not emotional. And I was totally shaken up because I didn't expect it. Like, he never needed me. He was not the kid that got homesick. But I could tell at that moment he was really, really struggling. And when he hung up, I was just like, I don't know if he's going to get on the plane. Like, he was so shaken up. This is a Sunday. About 15 minutes later, Dwayne texted me this picture. And right after he had gotten off that call, these three, or I guess there's four of them, were heading to, and actually, yeah, Wayne's there. Okay, yeah. So these four were heading to a conference together. And they walked up and they saw him. And they knew him, because that's my point, is we're integrated. Integrate your life. They all knew my son, and they lifted him up and sat with him until it was time for him to get on his flight. And that meant the world to me. And when you integrate your life, you can find that balance that you're trying to achieve, and it will bless you in so many ways. And so later he was struggling with some health issues and needed to come home early, which is totally ironic because then 6 weeks later, COVID shut things down and he would have come home anyway. But it was going to be emotional. It was kind of unexpected, very last minute. And I had said to Mark, like, I can't come to that meeting. We have to go get Caden at the airport. We're standing at the airport and Mark comes walking in. And he just said, I knew today was going to be hard and I want to be there for you and Caden. So that's what happens when you integrate your life with work. And that's what Squire is. And as we get bigger, it's harder for us to like keep that culture. So help us help you, like, get involved, bring your families to the Halloween party, come to the things. That is what we want Squire to be. And you're going to hear a lot about that next year as we're rolling out our refresh of our culture and our value statements and our 50th anniversary. We're going to be talking about that a lot. So I like the segues because of that, but that was also a conference this year. I brought my daughter with me to the conference. When we do these like Squire sports teams, family members are always invited to play. The fun runs, this was a fun run that I did with my family. This was the Ragnar, my husband did the Ragnar. I don't know how many of you know about the red balls. I hope they're still around somewhere, advisory. But I was actually at a conference. It might have been that same one because I remember, no, it was a different one. It was at a conference and one of the vendors had stress balls. And I walked by the booth and they were like, here, have a stress ball. And then the next day they're like, have a stress ball. And I was like, oh, I got one yesterday. And the person running the booth said, oh, well, we like to put them in our coworkers' overhead bins. And then when they open them up, they all come plopping out. And I was like, well, it's going to take a whole lot more than two. So he said, well, come back on the last day and I'll give you whatever we have left. So we went back and we brought back this huge bag of red stress balls. And those things have been floating around the advisory floor for probably 6-7 years. And when we first did it, we put them in and they didn't fall out. They just got stuck. So my kids came and helped devise like this whole system where the stress balls would fall out. And so if any of you have had it happen to you, there's like probably a 50% chance my kids did it and I might not have even known about it. Like they'd bring me dinner and then they'd go put the stress balls in someone's overhead bin. We used to have rubber band wars around here all the time. That's my husband sitting there with a rubber band, sneaking up on somebody during tax season late at night. Like these are the kind of things we want to do to integrate you and your family into our culture. If you have to work late nights, have fun with it. Have your family come join in on the fun. So, right, what do I have left? I'm over time. I think this is my last one though. This is from Sheryl Sandberg's book. And I feel pretty strongly about this one too, but overcome the queen bee mentality. The queen bee mentality is that there really can only be one female at the top. And it's a documented phenomenon that happens where women will like hold back other women because it feels like a competition because you're so used to only a few being at the top. So if we all work together, I think this group has been very successful at that anyway. But overcome the queen bee mentality. And I really like Madeline Albright here, but there's a special place in hell for women who do not help other women. And I feel very strongly about that. Like we're all facing these challenges together and we can work on them together. There's not a competition. I guarantee you, Megan, I don't see Megan here, but she's probably online. But Megan, Amanda, and I would love to, there's no like, we want to be the only three. So we want more women at the table with us. So we rarely sit at the big table anymore. We don't fit, but the virtual table, we want you there. So this is just for that client, like things that help to run a successful women's program. So I'm like 2 minutes over time, but do you want to quit? Ask questions? What do you want to do? Anyone?
There's questions and you guys want to stay and ask some questions?
Does anyone have questions? If you need to leave, anybody can leave. You will not offend me. I don't easily offend.
Jonyce, I have a question.
Yeah.
Can I use some of your materials at the Global Women's Summit in November?
Sure, Jim.
All right.
I'll have Courtney send you my PowerPoint.
I'll get with you.
Okay. For sure. For sure.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Once you decided you wanted to be partner, how long was that path to get there?
Good question. Probably should have talked a little bit about my path. I know some people are familiar, but probably most of you are not. So I mentioned I started as an intern and then I worked part-time while I finished school. When I graduated a year later, I was expecting Caden. And so I only worked full-time. He was born in September. So I worked full-time from like April to September and then I went part-time. And then somewhere along the way, I needed health insurance. So I went back to full-time. And then I know prior to having Kaylee, I went back to part-time. And I think I went between full-time and part-time, I don't know, probably 7 or 8 times. That tells you how willing Squire is to work with you. And I was one of the first ones doing it. Tim was always very patient with me, willing to let me do what worked for me and my family. And also helping me to come up with the technology. I mean, the remote access we have now did not exist. And so we were kind of, I was one of the first ones to help us try out Citrix technology back in the day. And, you know, we tried things and we're still willing to try things. But I never had when I was doing the back and forth between full-time and part-time, I didn't necessarily see myself on a partner path. Probably because I didn't see anyone else ever doing that kind of thing. But you now have myself and Megan who have done full-time, part-time, full-time, part-time before we became a partner. And so that's a very well like documented path now that the firm works with you to get to that. When I became a manager, I switched to full-time, and I think I just kind of in my head was like, well, if I'm going to be doing this, why would I not want to work to becoming a partner? And that probably was like 2007 or 8, and I became a partner in 2011. So but the time I got really serious about it was probably about 5 to 6 years. So, but I was with the firm. I started in 99 and I became a partner in 2011. Good question. I saw another hand. Yeah, Debbie.
When you were a young mother, well, let me preface that. I have worked in other jobs as a young mother, and the school calls up, you know, Caden's throwing up. You gotta come get him, you know.
Poor Caden. You guys cannot tell Caden about this meeting.
So, you know, and so then you're kind of stuck, you know, like, well, I've got to go get my child. And the people at work are like giving you looks and hinting like, do you really want this job? You know,
Right.
You're putting your job in jeopardy by going and picking up your child and seeing if grandma can watch them or you have to stay home with them. Did you have to deal with anything like that?
I'm going to give you a non-answer answer. Maybe it should become a story on my presentation someday. But when I was in that ELA program, and one of the days I was working with Shane, I remember asking him specifically, like, what do you do when your kids are sick? He's just like, what do you mean? I was like, what do you do when your kids are sick? Like, my wife handles that problem. And then it was like he realized what I was saying. And so he's like, well, who can we go talk to? Because I obviously don't have the right answer. And we realized, I mean, there were other women who were dealing with it, but not necessarily above me, right? So in that safe zone to talk to about what they were doing. And so Shane actually encouraged me to go get a mentor outside the firm. And I found a female partner in a law firm, and she helped mentor me through that. So that's one of my things too, is if there's not the perfect mentor for you, we'll work with you to help find the perfect mentor for you. And she was more mean than Shane, to be quite honest. I would bring something up and she's like, all right, well, you're going to talk to them about that. And I was like, maybe. And she's like, well, I won't have another meeting with you until you're ready to report on it. So like the only way she would continue to mentor me is if I like promised to follow up on those hard conversations. So it's important to have mentors who push you. So that's one thing though, Debbie. So that's my non-answer about how we kind of addressed it. But the reality is in like especially since the last 2 years, but we've always been that way. There's so much flexibility in what you're doing that you can, you know, as long as you are making sure that deadlines are met, communication happens, clients are taken care of, we are very flexible with people. And so most of the time I would just say, hey, I'm not gonna be able to come in today. I'm gonna work from home because I'm, you know, dealing with this situation at home. It's a little bit harder if you're an administrative assistant or, you know, sometimes there's more of an on-site thing. I think the biggest thing really still comes down to communication. When you say Jen, like from Jen being over that department, like it just comes down to communication, and we'll try to come up with ways to communicate with you. So.
Luckily, I'm past that point.
Yes, right. Right. One story, when you first started asking, really, seriously, you guys cannot tell Caden. Although Valerie asked me this question in the onboarding, so in front of Caden. So she wanted me to tell an embarrassing story of Caden, but this is one of my like work from home mom moments. This is another thing that I think COVID has helped with, is like, I did not want anyone to know that I was working from home, that I had kids around. Now, like, it's normal for the dogs to bark. It's normal for the kids to cry. I still think you need to be professional, but it's way more acceptable than it was 22 years ago. So I was on a conference call with Intuit, and Caden was not happy with me. And so I went and hid in my closet, and I was on the phone, and he finally figured out where I was at. And so he's like pounding on the closet, screaming. So I went somewhere else. He found me there. So I finally went out to my front porch. It's not a proud mom moment, but I went out to my front porch, and I held the door shut as I held the phone as far away as I could so that they could not hear him screaming, and he was on the other side of the door like, let me out. I'm really happy that barriers have come down the last few years where I could now I would just say, can I take a minute to calm down my child and come back? It's not just okay for the kid to scream, but it would be okay to say, can I take a minute and fix the situation? So yeah.
Does Kaden remember that?
He was like 2. He remembers being told the story, especially because Valerie made me tell it in front of his whole interview. So, yeah.
But if you don't have to deal with it with kids, then you have to deal with it your parents.
Yeah, I'm gonna say there's that new, what they call the sandwich generation, right? Where parents and you still have adult kids somewhat in your life and you're in there. I think it's exactly the same.
Yeah,
Work
it
with
is.
us, communicate
It is.
what the needs are. We're flexible location, we're flexible hours. It really comes down to communicating and meeting deadlines. If you communicate and you meet the deadline, we're going to be really flexible on where you do it, when you do it, how you do it. Now, you may realize that it might, if you can't always be here to network and you can't go build business, because becoming a partner involves building business. So it may slow you down a few years because you have to step back out of networking situations, but it doesn't stop you. Once you're ready to be back into all the networking and building business, you're just going to step right back in and keep going. So something I really like. Yeah.
Was it hard for you personally to balance your own career aspirations with your family and the goals that you had for your family?
So accomplishing our family goals, or
Yeah, you want to be an amazing mom and make sure that dinner's always made and things are always taken care of, but you also you have made amazing
Right.
things with your career. Is it hard to find the happy medium?
Amanda and I have talked about we need to have a whole time on mom guilt sometime. So the answer is yes, and there's definitely certain things that I've had to I had to just let go of the idea of a perfect house. Once I got to a level that I felt that I could afford help, I had to decide that I was willing to get that help. And so I do have somebody that comes in and helps me clean, because otherwise I was just constantly going to be a source of fighting with my husband because he won't do it at the level I want it to, that kind of stuff. But what I really found is Squire was so flexible. I was able to do more of things that I think mattered more than the things that I thought might. That was a really poorly worded, but let me try and say it in real terms. Going into being a mom, I pictured perfect house, meals on the table, etc. What I realized is those were not the things that mattered. But what did matter was when my son's first grade teacher said, hey, I can't get any parents to volunteer to read with kids in the classroom. I really need a parent who could commit to every Friday for the rest of the school year. And I was like, okay. So I went and every Friday and read with kids for 3 hours Friday mornings. And I still got my hours at Squire. I doubt I even told Tim I was doing that. I just did it. And it was fine. I was the mom that was the chaperone of every field trip, I got to go, and it's cool because I had all the super cool opportunities. I chaperoned the theater group to New York twice. I had amazing opportunities because Squire was so flexible with me. I could just go do that. And other moms were not actually able to do that. So what I started to find was by doing this integration and flexibility, I could focus on the things that really mattered and let go of that picture in my mind of what was kind of what I thought, a clean house and dinner at 5 o'clock was not what was important. Being with them at all their events. I don't think I missed any events unless I would happen to be out of town for training or something like that. So.
I think, honestly, I see that my kids are really self-sufficient. And I kind of wonder if, those kids that have moms that do everything for them are as self-sufficient. My kids wake themselves up for school, and they have to get up early, 6 o'clock. And I was talking to a mom And she's like, yeah, I have to like be sure to wake them up and da, da, da. I'm like, like my kids just do that, you know? So like my 6-year-old, she like gets herself food, you know? So I think it's, maybe that's not ideal, but there's some positive in that too, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, there is. I think the skills you learn too, adding to it, the skills you learn help you out. So all these medical issues my family has dealt with, I actually at the end of the day have solved most of them. And I've had doctors who were like, what's your medical degree in? I had one, my favorite one.
This is true.
I had one where, this is my favorite comment. He's like, you're the most well-read parent I've ever worked with. And I said, is that code for the biggest pain in the butt? And he was like, probably. So, but I go in there, and that's the thing is that my research skills that I learned here, if I can research tax code, I can research medical conditions. And so
Problem solving.
Right,
I feel like I
problem
have to problem solve for everybody in my life.
Exactly. It's exactly it. And you know, the same doctor, he's like, the thing is though, and that's what he was referring to with the well-read. He said, people walk in here all the time with Google and I discount them immediately. He's like, you bring me PubMed, NIH. He's like, I can't argue with you because you have real studies. And I'm like, well, when my tax clients walk in with Google, I don't listen to them either. So there's no way I'm ever going to walk into a doctor with Google. So, I mean, I think you learn skills. Advocacy is a huge one, especially again, back to medical, because that's my life. The advocacy skills I have learned, I guarantee you have led to my family having better medical care. And I don't think I would have learned that if I wasn't working.
I have a question. Oh.
Yeah.
Hi, sorry. As like a younger woman in this field and as someone who's still going to school and stuff like that, what advice would you give for when there are women at the firm, but there aren't a lot of like just being a younger woman in more professional settings? I don't know what age you entered, the workforce, but just kind of navigating that and being taken as a professional while being younger in a firm with more advanced people, I guess.
Right. Great question. I mean, I was in college, because like I said, I did my internship and then I worked part-time while I finished. I would say sit down with someone. It goes back to that tell. So tell people what you want to do, and let us help you come up with a plan. And then Willie will advocate for you and with you to put you in those opportunities. And of course, like we post the opportunities in the WIP group and you may be volunteering, but let's make it like a strategic targeted plan, so that you actually have coaches and mentors working with you. One thing I've been talking to some of my team about is we have some really amazing stories in the firm of women who kind of started near similar to where you're at, McKay, and have become. So Reba, that actually just left, started as an administrative assistant. And she worked for us the whole time she went to school, and then became a manager, CPA, worked her way up in the firm. We got a number. I saw Jenny online. So Jenny was my administrative assistant when she first started with the firm, and now is working on HR. She's in our HR department and continually working on her HR skills. Sarah started as an administrative assistant, and she did such an amazing job at a marketing an event that our prior marketing manager really struggled with, that when he departed, we just offered her to move over to marketing manager, even though she didn't have her education or background in that. There's a number of these. Shara. Yeah, Shara is another one. So Shara is leading the entire sales tax team, and started with the firm. And she actually left, moved out of state, came back to the firm. Like we want to invest in your entire career. The cost, if you actually look at the cost of training an employee, like bringing you up to what I call tribal knowledge, understanding our systems and how things work, it's really expensive. Like we'd rather invest in you and keep you long-term and help you stay. So
Jonyce,
it's a really great question. Yeah, please.
I would say professionalism and your appearance would really help too. As you're younger, maybe like dress more professionally, learn how to learn business etiquette so that you can, seem like you're more mature in the professional field. So that's something I would recommend.
Yeah.
Appearance, professionalism.
If your goal is to become a partner, act like a partner. So dress like a partner, show up to the events they would, be on time, turn your camera on, engage, all of those things, get your training done. So act to the level that you want to be. Great question, MK. Sorry, I'm looking at you, but it probably doesn't look like it because the camera's there.
You're good.
I just
Thanks.
realized that. I'm like, I'm looking right at her, but that would be better. Oh, Sarah.
So this question got sparked just when we were talking about kids. What advice would you give to someone, and I mean, I'm speaking about myself, but I know there's other people in my same situation who maybe don't have kids and feel like we don't deserve the same, like, I guess, like time off or like, you know, like being like, oh, it's okay, your kids need you, so like go do this. I feel like nothing I have to do is like that important, I guess, if that makes sense. And so sometimes like I feel guilty for taking time off because I'm like, well, it's not for my kids because I don't actually have kids, but it's for my personal life. I'm trying to find a husband. I'm trying to get kids. And so sometimes I'm like, well, the fact that I want to go on this date is just as important as like
Oh, for
your
sure.
guys' kids. But like, I guess it's almost like what you're saying with imposter syndrome. It's like, I don't feel like I deserve it. I'm kind of like, no, I'll just be a worker bee. Like, I don't need the time off. Like, what
But
advice? would
I
you
was
give
gonna say to a certain
That's a
extent,
good
my
question.
answer is kind of like just the imposter syndrome, like face it, because I'm going to assume nobody here thought I didn't belong at the front today, right? Even though I felt like I didn't. As you're telling me that, I'm like, I have never literally once thought that about a single person. So like, the first thing I think is realizing that most of the stories are in our own head. And even just giving voice to them. So just you saying that out loud now makes it easier for you to talk to your supervisors about it. And we're all gonna say, yeah, Sierra, we're totally fine with that. I actually, there's two specific employees over the years that I can think of that left because they're like, I'll never get married if I stay at Squire. And I was like, what? And you're giving me more insight today into why they felt that way, maybe? I never understood it because we never really talked about it. I was like, you should have lots of time. You don't have kids. Why don't you? Yeah. So give it a voice. I think that's the biggest thing with anything you're working on in your career is have that scary conversation and give it a voice. And once you do, maybe it's probably not as big as you think it is. And B, if it is, at least now we can talk about it. So I don't think I can ever think of a time it was bigger than what somebody thought it was, at least. So yeah, Linda.
So we've had some discussion about like talking to your supervisor about like what you want. What about when you aren't sure what you want, like what the end goal is? Because like I don't know, I don't know if I see myself as partner someday, but I would like to be successful, and I don't know necessarily all the time what that looks like. So how much of it is like you setting the goal on your own and being like, okay, now what do I do to get there? And how much of it is like sitting down and being like, what exactly are my options? Because I feel like sometimes I don't want to have those discussions. Because I don't want to look like an idiot when I'm like, I don't know what my options are and things like that.
Many Lean In review again. I'm just thinking. I love the book Lean In. One of the things Sheryl Sandberg talks about in Lean In is like women are very natural at what you're saying. Like, oh, I don't know. And so until I know, then I'm gonna hold back. And so she talks a lot about like, don't put your foot on the brake until it's time to put your foot on the brake. And so we want to assume the self. So as much as I was saying people in the past, we had that attitude of like assuming people weren't on partner path until they said they were. We actually have really flipped to that. And I still think you need to speak up and tell us because then we can make sure you're getting resources. But we try to assume everybody is, and we're investing in you. Now, if partner path isn't perfect for you, we created director path a few years ago. So we actually have multiple paths. Paraprofessional, if you are going to be on a paraprofessional path, we used to just have one level of paraprofessional. We've got an entire level of paraprofessionals. We're working now on an administrative path. So the firm is very invested in everybody here. It really, I think it just goes back to having the conversation. I'm not totally sure what I want. Can I explore the opportunities? What does it look like? Then that lets us say, hey, I want to go to lunch with some of the partners and talk to them about what it means to be a partner. I want to go talk about what it means to be a director. I want to be, hey, what if I just wanted to stay and become the firm administrator? Like, I don't know if you covered this when you did it, Jen, or not, but you had to make, like, you made a choice to go into like a firm administration path versus staying on an accounting path, right?
I did.
So, yeah, I don't know if you guys know, but Jen has an accounting degree. And that's what makes her like an awesome firm administrator, because she gets us.
And I do tax returns too, before I decided to go on the corporate side. I had a managing partner who actually sat me down and said, you have to make a choice. I think I told that story last, that meeting, but anyway, yeah.
I mean, I think if somebody came to, there's certain people that if you came to me and said, I just really would love to do marketing for Squire the rest of my life, we'd create a marketing position for you because you're really good at that kind of, like, we are very adaptable to that, but we don't read minds. We haven't figured that part out yet. So yeah, let's just have conversations about it. That's the big thing I would say. And I know I kind of said this earlier, but I want to stress it again. We're so busy. It's not that we don't want to talk to you, but there's a very likely chance partners are not proactively asking you maybe things that they should. So please, you know, what I hate to hear is like somebody who's like, I'm going to leave because, you know, nobody has talked to me about my career. And I'm like, well, tell us that you haven't. You know, I remember years ago one of my employees saying, well, maybe if I'd been assigned a mentor, then I would have been able to stay. And I was like, did you ever ask for a mentor? So yeah, let us know what your needs are, because we want to have those conversations with you. So I really love, I don't even know all who's doing it. I think a whole bunch of them are, but you guys settled on a name for yourselves. There was Junior Tax Women, but then you kind of changed it up, so you weren't exclusive. But the newer, what did you come up with?
I mean, I think I've been like calling, I mean, some of my lunches with partners have been just take the interns out, or not that we're interns anymore, but just kind of, yeah, the junior employees.
Yes. Anyway, so group of the junior tax staff, I'm trying to make sure I don't use an offensive word here. But the junior tax staff have like proactively said, hey, we want to take partners to lunch and ask them questions. We love that. I loved it was like 2 hours that I spent with that group of junior tax staff. I love it. But would I have like on my own walked down and said, hey, do the 8 of you want to go to lunch sometime and talk about me? I probably never would have done that. So yeah, like I totally get, I really love that you guys are doing it. And I think it's a great example for everyone else. So do it, speak up, ask for those opportunities for sure. Anyone else? Anyone online? We don't want to ignore anyone online. Cool. I'm always happy to answer questions. I know just my title, back to words matter. I know my title alone makes it seem like I might not be approachable, but I promise I am. So I'm happy to answer questions anytime. And yeah, let me know how I can help direct firm resources, or if you have a question about who's the best person to mentor me about this, or this. I'm generally pretty aware of who's gone through something similar. And while I just told Debbie I had that experience where someone hadn't gone through something similar to me, we are getting to the size where a lot of those things we have, and you know, you just don't necessarily always talk about them. That's why I actually decided not to eliminate the slides about my family, is because I think it's important for people to know what we live at home and here, so that we know who's going through similar things, and you have people who are resources too. So if you need anything, you know, do let me know. And there will be times that I'm not trying to say we have it all, but when we don't, we'll help, just like Shane helped me, we'll help you find somebody who has been through something similar, for sure. So, thanks for listening to me. Thank you.